Welcome to Mintel's Little Conversation podcast.
Welcome to Mintel's Little Conversation, where our experts bring you fresh ideas and new perspectives on how consumers eat, drink, shop, groom and think. Each episode features a discussion of current topics, from the latest consumer trends and new products to shifts in markets and lifestyles. I'm Andrew McDougall, Global Beauty Analyst on the Beauty and Personal Care Research team, and today I'm delighted to be joined by two of my Global Beauty Analyst colleagues. I have our skincare expert, Alex Fisher, with us today. Alex, hello.
Hello, Andrew. How are you doing today?
I'm very good. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you very much. Thanks for asking.
No problem at all. We're also joined today by Margaux Caron, who is our colour cosmetics and fragrance expert as well. Hello, Margaux. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Andrew. Thank you.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
How are we both doing today? Are we all excited? Are we all good?
I'm pumped. I'm absolutely pumped to be here.
Will you be even more pumped if I tell you today we are going to be talking about men in beauty, men's grooming, and just the men's skincare, hair care, and colour cosmetics field, and see how that market's going. We've been talking about a lot of potential in the market for years, but it's never really fully been cracked. We saw in recent news as well that the British Army is looking to potentially accept men in uniform wearing makeup. So we're seeing a lot of moves being made. But whereabouts are we with the market? I mean, I want to start maybe, Margaux, with yourself as the colour cosmetics expert. Where are we seeing men's makeup right now? Because there's a lot of noise being made in certain countries or in certain demographics, but it doesn't always transfer into purchase. There's still quite a limited market. So where are we?
So we've seen that in Asia, in Japan, or in South Korea, for example, men's makeup is way more accepted right now. For example, you have in South Korea, men actually being introduced to makeup usage in the army. But it's actually really emerging in the West. It's still niche as a category for men, but we see it emerging through two kind of brands and through two kinds of, I would say, aesthetics. One would be like more gender bending, more expressive, something a little bit more artistic, like we've seen in Milk makeup, for example, or Fluid, all these brands that really are into genderless beauty. But you also have things around something more gender neutral, which has potential to tap into a more mainstream audience, a broader audience, and it's more about genderless enhancement and boosting self-esteem, rather than complete artistry, and it has the potential to speak to most men.
Boosting self-esteem is definitely a topic I want to come to in a bit, and I know you're keen to speak on that as well,
Always.
Alex. But just touching back on some of the points you made there, you mentioned obviously men's makeup being a bit bigger in Asia, sort of smaller obviously in the West. Are there certain markets in Europe as well? I mean, Alex as well, I don't know if you've seen this in skincare, where, I mean, we see in the UK, again, certain sort of areas of the UK are using men's makeup more and more. Is this throughout Europe, or is it just a UK thing?
Yes, definitely. So you see that, for example, in Spain, you have way more makeup usage than in Germany, for example. So you have a bit of like a diverse type of usage regarding which country you're in.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that there'd be that much difference in makeup usage, I think, within Europe. I think because when I think about skincare amongst men in Europe, it's pretty similar across the board. There's pretty low usage. Men don't really understand their skin type. So yeah, that's really interesting to hear about makeup. Is it that there's differences between, as you said, there's the artistry and kind of the gender neutral aesthetics? Is that something that's different between countries at all?
I think it has more to do with like the general attitude in terms of male grooming. When we see in Mediterranean countries, you have way more usage in terms of grooming products, grooming time as well. So I guess it's getting a little bit more maybe sophisticated in these markets.
Okay. That's interesting.
Alex, how do you see it playing out in the skincare market then, in terms of, is it similar? I mean, is usage, you mentioned earlier that there's a lack of understanding which is hindering the market.
Yes.
I mean, how are you seeing sort of the skincare market looking?
So within Europe specifically, the skincare market for men, it's quite limited. I think we see more kind of women's brands just launching a men's product or trying to launch a men's range. We've seen that done for a while now. So, for example, you had Dove, and then you had Dove Men Plus Care, or you've had examples like that. Nivea, and then Nivea Men. But basically the products really feel they're they feel like the same thing. They don't feel like a separate range that is specific to men's needs. But at the same time, there's almost not a reason to cater specifically to men because they don't understand their skin type. If you ask a man in the same way as you ask a woman to describe their skin, they'll say dry or oily, but apart from that, so they don't really think about the size of their pores. They don't think about that much whether it's sensitive or not. And we've seen facial hair is a real driver of this. So it's almost that men with beards, they don't think so much about the skin underneath their beards, but they are more involved in other areas of men's grooming like hair care because they're looking after their facial hair and they're looking after their beards. But because there's not as much visible skin, they're not as aware of their skin needs. And so you see that quite a lot throughout Europe and through the US where facial hair is more popular, but in Asian countries where the men are more clean shaven, they have a better understanding of their skin. So that probably then helps to drive that idea and that usage of male makeup as well, because they are paying much more attention to their face.
It's interesting you mentioned that actually about like the beard, especially for Western markets, as you say, for the beard. Speaking as the only person in the room with a beard, it's interesting because it has we've seen this launch of like a plethora of skincare and hair care brands off the back of this sort of barbershop trend and the beard trend, and people thinking more about grooming. I mean, in hair care, for example, which is obviously something I specialise in a little bit more, we do see again this idea that men traditionally with hair care would be just doing the basics, the hygiene basics. I'll shampoo, I'll wash my hair. There's a big drop off to men that then condition their hair treatments again, and then so again lower down still. So we've traditionally seen that, but we are beginning to see men using hair care products in a slightly different way. For example, in Latin America, we're seeing certain treatments, masks, being potentially an intriguing or an interesting approach for men there. Also with hair colour as well. I mean, it's generally, apart from younger men or the Gen Z now, it's traditionally again hair colour for men has always been covering the greys or covering the whites. It's kind of just the Just for Men, which does a very good product and targets this product very well, but that's kind of it. When you speak to people sort of my age around hair colour, that's generally what they're thinking of when they think of hair colour. Whereas now, I guess it's with young women as well as young men, we do now see this Gen Z coming through where maybe they want bright hair colours, they want to express themselves. So it's interesting to see how these markets are sort of changing as well as our lifestyles and our values change as well.
Definitely. I think that's a really interesting point you just brought up there about that kind of shift within hair colour. That's also made me think about this kind of overall shift in male attitudes just towards the way they look. So self-expression that you brought up I thought was really interesting, just because as you said, with hair colour, it used to be all about covering greys. But as we've started to, and women as well, we're starting to be more accepting of ageing in general. You and I were on a podcast a while ago about seniors and appealing to seniors within beauty. And it's the idea that ageing is much more acceptable. And so therefore brands can't just talk about ageing. And that's the same for male brands. I think men have always been much more accepting of kind of as they're getting older anyway. And so hair colour especially is a category that's had to really kind of step up their marketing to younger men and talk more about that idea of self-expression and using colours and that artistry in makeup to sort of be more expressive and allow them to do that. And we see from a lot of our research that younger men feel that it's much more important to express themselves through these kind of creative outlets and through beauty, whereas older men don't feel that need.
That kind of raises a really interesting point, actually, with regards to how we target men. Just with regards to the fact, do we need to start fresh? Do we need to rip up the rule book and go back? Because, as you mentioned before, when you talk about aging, for example, it is this idea, well, actually, men's skin ages differently to women's skin. I'm not meaning to cause any problems here, but for example, men are much less likely to get wrinkles at a younger age. It's much more likely to come in at much more advanced years. So again, it is this example now. There's different collagen levels in the skin. There's different hormones in play. So men do potentially need a different formulated product. So do we need to start fresh and change the whole way that we market men's products to men?
I think within skincare, definitely. as we said, at the moment, men aren't really understanding of their skin type. So it's more about education from there. And you really do need to start afresh. I think, as we said, it's previously been women's brands just adding a male product on, but the formulas are the same. But as you say, their skin types are different, but men don't realize it. So I think they're not treating their skin as well as they could be. So there's definitely the education piece that needs to happen. And we've seen a lot of younger men. So my favorite example is this Instagram account called Dewy Dudes, DEWY Dudes. They also have a podcast, and they kind of use bro language, and they use memes to really sort of masculinize the skincare conversation, because a lot of men think that it's quite feminine to talk about skincare, but they're using this as a way to bring it, and get men talking about their own skin needs and getting them to realize sort of what it is that's important when it comes to skincare. But yeah, the fact that they are kind of bringing that conversation to the male arena and doing it better than a lot of brands are doing, actually, because as we said, brands are kind of just adding a bit of grey or sort of hydropower action to whatever products that they're launching, and thinking that that's how you man up skincare. But actually, once men understand a bit better, and in the same way as we talk to men about tech, and it's all about having to understand technology, and once they kind of see their skin as something similar to technology and to how to work it best, I think that's where we need to start from for men.
So I guess it also introduced the question of, do products need to be gendered? Do products need to be gender specific or genderless? I guess a lot of men are expecting gender specific products, especially for grooming, for skincare, for personal care. But there are other categories. I see, for example, in terms of makeup, genderless needs to be really pushed as a claim, because gendered products, for example, are only they're seen as very feminine in Western countries. So it could be seen as completely incompatible if brands are advertising makeup as something masculine, or with traditional masculine territories in terms of aesthetics, in terms of claim. So it's true that there is this balance to find between what product should be gender specific and what product should be genderless or gender neutral. And I guess it's a broader discussion in the beauty industry to have right now.
It's interesting you say that, actually, about the genderless versus gender specific, because we do, some of the research we have in beauty to men does say that men do want certain gender specific products. And that kind of goes slightly against the whole sort of inclusive and sort of talking about how we shouldn't be targeting by demographic potentially. So it is a completely different approach to have. And it's interesting that you say, obviously, in the makeup market, actually, you know what, it doesn't have to be so gender specific. Genderless would actually work a bit better, because we have seen campaigns where they're really bold and they're really strong adverts to show men using makeup. However, that potentially isn't going to work for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very subtle, really, because it's more about the aesthetics and the positioning of a brand rather than maybe a product collection. So I guess brands need to be gender neutral in how they speak to their consumers, but when you target men, it's more like targeting men using a gender neutral approach. So even if you use a gender neutral approach, it's actually to target men. It's what Chanel and Givenchy did for their male collection, which is actually gender neutral communication, gender neutral products, but they're actually targeting men. And you see that even if men feel that makeup communicated as a male, as a very traditional male territories, is a bit incompatible, I think that some products, some makeup products need to be actually created for men and not just adapted from a feminine offer. So for example, in Korea, you have these very interesting products that are made only for men, which are cushions. So cushions for the hairline or for the skull to maybe hide some sparse hair. So it's basically a makeup product that has been completely uniquely developed for men and doesn't exist in the female territory, female offer.
Wow.
So that's interesting because you have this balance between gender neutral and gender specific to find.
Is that as well then maybe the first example that there are, again, we do need to actually target men maybe a bit better, but maybe more personally, and maybe looking at their personality, they are going to be slightly different to women's issues. Obviously, things like cover up, you need to cover up blemishes, or if there's sort of any skin pigmentation or anything, that is obviously the same. But in terms of actually, the actual products that men are going to be attracted to and think, oh yeah, I do actually want that. I don't mind using that kind of product. Again, that is going to have to be something that, again, brands should be looking at. How do we target our consumer? What do they want?
Yeah, I think there's a huge swathe of men who are happy to use female brands at the moment, just because these are those men that either understand that male brands aren't any different from female brands in a lot of product types, and it's all just marketing. So things that, as I said before about kind of Hydra Power, Panther, Steel, whatever kind of words you want to use to market to a man, they realize that actually that's very similar to things like, it's just a different fragrance usually. It's nothing to do with the actual product themselves. And so they say, well, I can...
blue, black or silver.
Yeah, exactly. And it's no different to what's in the bottle that is green or white or yellow, which are all a bit more kind of gender neutral colours, and fragrances usually are a bit more. So citrus fragrance is quite gender neutral from what we've seen. So you've got men who kind of realize that there's no actual difference in the formulation, so I don't mind using a woman's product for X, Y, and Z. So especially in kind of Mediterranean countries where you've still got big families all living together, they're happy to buy a women's shower gel brand for everyone to use. They don't really see the difference in the function of the product. And so I think but then you've also got the idea that men almost don't want to be targeted, or they don't want to be specified in that way with blue, black, grey packaging and that kind of stuff. They see through it. And so, you've got to bring men in a way that feels authentic. It can't just be adding these colours or adding these fragrances and saying that is male specific, because that isn't. As you said, like, we've got a lot of products coming out specifically for women's issues. So things like hormonal skincare, we've seen a lot. So menopausal products, for example, but we don't see that happening in the male space as much. We've seen a couple of brands bring out products specifically for sort of male hygiene, especially around the groin area and things like that, talking about testicular cancer. So, kind of encouraging that health message, but there's definitely a long way to go there. There's a lot of messages that we still exclude men from, things like body positivity, for example. We don't talk to men specifically about body positivity, even though there are still those same issues there, and men don't have that self-confidence in the same way as women don't have that self-confidence. And so we're trying to target them and saying, you're strong, you're manly, you need these Hydra, Steel, whatever. But actually they're saying, we are just as sensitive as women. We do need to be targeted differently, but not in that stereotyped way.
That's interesting, because that reminds me of a funny campaign that I thought was really good by, I think it was Dollar Shave Club. They did the dad bod.
Oh, the dancing, yes.
I thought that was a superb campaign of just like, here's your dad bod. And just like, again, it was a case of, some were in shape, some, they were all different shapes and sizes. And it was just kind of like, that's kind of better than just having, beautiful David Gandy as he is, but we don't all look like that.
No?
No. So no, I thought it was a very nice campaign. It's a bit humorous, but I think it's nice to have those types of messages. I remember, I think it was Gillette in Spain did a similar thing, where it was talking about what it meant to be a man, what masculinity was. And they had, men just sort of saying, it's, I define being a man as, competing. I define a man as, crying. I define a man as, dressing up in drag. It was a really good campaign as well. So it's interesting to see how the messages are having to change for men now.
Those campaigns, that Dollar Shave Club one I really loved, because you were right, and it had them in there, it had their dad bods or all their different body types, but also some were wearing aprons, some were holding different things, because it wasn't about it's not about the body shape of what makes you a man. It's not that. It's, and you enjoy different hobbies, you enjoy different things as a man. You can have a wide variety of interests. It doesn't have to just be sport. Everything's always a tie-in with sport. It doesn't have to be sport. You've got so many men who aren't interested in that. Men who are interested in technology, or they're interested in reading. They've got historical or nature walking, or that kind of stuff, like loads of different interests that a lot of men have. And so sport kind of really it makes the message very one-dimensional, and it almost makes it's really similar to the idea of like that Bic pen for women. Because it's pink, suddenly women will want to buy it. And it's the same idea as well, because it includes sport or because it's in a certain colour package, men will want to buy it.
But is the counter-argument almost that will reach a mass audience, though, in terms of if I have a certain sports star who has global coverage and has global reach, that is going to hit a certain mass audience for me, so that will work? Or does that seem a bit dated or a bit...
I think it's a hard one. I think that's mass recognition, and you see a lot of celebrities being used in that same way. You know, singers, actresses, everything like that. You see that in the women's arena a lot.
You have to be careful you pick, though, because you could pick someone nowadays, a celebrity nowadays, and they'll do something. And it's like,
God, yeah.
we don't want them as an ambassador.
Exactly.
Not naming any names.
No, of course.
We're all thinking of one.
But then, yeah, you've got these celebrity ambassadors, and that's the thing. Like, if they're known for sport, you risk the people who don't know that much about sport not recognizing them. But if they are known outside of that arena, if they've reached that mass kind of that mass celebrity, you then start being known for potentially bad things that you've done outside of that arena, as you say. And so then it's like, well, do I want to be associated with this man or this woman? Is that the kind of person that I think I am? And therefore, that using those sports stars does reach that mass audience, but if you go beyond that, sometimes it can be a really bad thing. It's not what you want your brand to be associated with.
I think also beyond the cars and the sport and all these very traditional masculine things to push when you advertise something, there are also so many things that are gaining traction to target men and that are completely genderless, like being healthy or sustainability is a big one as well. And I guess now that consumers in general want deeper meaning when they consume, it's not so conspicuous anymore, like masculinely conspicuous in a way. And it's more around the common good. Even the family is now something that brands have pushed a lot, like how to be a dad, like the redefinition of like fatherhood. So I guess it's more something that's like beyond traditional classic territories like sports and cars.
Yeah. Joe Malone, they've recently launched their first male ambassador. I can't remember who it is. I think it's the Star Wars guy. I can't remember his name.
John Boyega.
Oh, yeah, that's the guy. And so he is the new gent, or they call him the gent for Joe Malone, because, he's it's typically a very female brand, and he's their first male ambassador.
So are we now seeing then, I'm glad we've come on to marketing campaigns because I like this, one of my favourite topics, but do we see a marketing campaign that's been done particularly well or particularly badly, or is there something that you think is, I really like that? We've mentioned a few already, but is there something that you've seen, whether it's in makeup, skincare, haircare, wherever, that you've just kind of thought, that brand has tried something a bit different, or they're targeting the right thing? I know Margaux, you were talking earlier about health and things like that, and how men, that's a good way to sort of not have such a masculine subject, but looking after your health. I know mental health has been something that a lot of brands are looking to try and promote men to talk more about. It's been the whole point behind the sort of the Movember movement, going back years and years. And that movement itself kind of shows just how we have progressed to the point where Movember used to be, I've got a moustache, and it was traditionally just about prostate cancer, whereas now it's about men's health and men's cancers in general, and just talking and opening up. And I remember the Lions Barber Collective, we've talked about this before, but sort of like going back 3 or 4 years, they launched a collective where they trained barbers to be therapists, to encourage men to speak about their social issues or their mental health issues, obviously to raise awareness that men should speak and can speak, but also to raise awareness of the fact that male suicide is still on the rise in certain countries, for example in the US, and depressions as well are on the rise as well, and we see that impacting us in lots of different ways. So are there campaigns that you think, I've kind of gone on a tangent there, but are there campaigns that you think just hit the mark pretty well or make a really good message?
In terms of, there are brands that have made a strong message, I think, and I've heard through some of the other podcasts we've done talking about the Gillette campaign and how divisive that was. But what we've seen off the back of that is other campaigns sort of almost learning from that and taking a more gentle approach to talking about things like toxic masculinity. So we've seen brands talk then, as you said, more about mental health, the mental health of men, and sort of almost saying like it's okay not to be, or not to be traditionally masculine, rather than saying you need to stop being traditionally masculine. So saying it's okay to have a softer side, and that's actually part of being a man. So I think we see a lot of other brands starting to talk like that, but we're still not there yet. I know recently we had World Mental Health Day, and so that's been a big talking point on a lot of social media. So I'm hoping a lot of brands are going to pick up on that as well, and I hope we'll start to see more kind of mental health campaigns in the future, especially targeted at men.
Done in an authentic way, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, because I think that was the one thing actually we saw from, going a little bit off topic, we saw that with the Pride month of a few months ago, where there were a few brands that
everything's just rainbow.
Yeah, and it was kind of like that's opportunism. You kind of your normal message doesn't really relate to this. So why are you now jumping on this? So it can be a really difficult one, I think, for brands to navigate. Again, go back to that Gillette example. Obviously, you have things like price differences and things like that, and is the message really right to come from that particular brand? But I think it started this conversation. It's making people talk about it, so that can only be a good thing. And Gillette followed it up with did you see the first shave advert as well, with the first transgender model, when his dad was teaching him how to have his first shave? I thought that was quite a touching. That wasn't a TV advert. I think that was one I saw on YouTube. It was about 5 to 10 minutes long, but it was just a really touching campaign. I just thought that makes sense, because it's a shaving company talking about shaving and talking about, again, an issue that has maybe been in the shadows for too long, and now one that we are happy to talk about more, and people are happy to have those conversations and want to have those conversations.
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot. So I think in the women's arena, we've definitely seen a lot of breast cancer awareness, teaming up with charities, donating a portion of the proceeds. But we haven't seen that traditionally as much with men's charities. No, Movember, I think, is one of the major ones that we see, and we see a lot of brands partnering with Movember. But as I mentioned, there's kind of the opportunity to get more hands-on with men's physical health as well. So the idea of sort of teaching men how to check for testicular cancer. You have a lot of women's products that talk a lot about breast cancer, how to check for lumps, or so Superdrug, they recently did their Superdrug Presents pop-up event in London, and they had a whole corner dedicated to their healthcare section that they have in store. But they also had nurses there who were there to help you sort of teach yourself how to examine your breasts for lumps, and they partner with that charity Copperfield. And you've got a lot of breast products now starting to come out, so oils that are sort of nice and de-stressing body oils, but also it's to encourage you to check yourself. And I think there's definitely an opportunity for men's brands to talk more specifically about those men's issues. That's the thing. I think, as you said, doing it in an authentic way, because as a men's brand, you are more of the authority in certain areas. So things like hair care and talking about maybe the mental health stigma associated with baldness, or being a body care brand that talks more about testicular cancer. There are definitely avenues where you can reach out to men on a more personal level, rather than just saying, here's a man driving a sports car, or here's a man kicking a football. There's ways to relate to every man in that way.
I actually remember that you showed me a brand which was very targeted to this area of the body.
Yes.
And it was very humorous.
It's very good. So they had a lot of different, I don't know how much I can say on a podcast. I don't know how much would be bleeped out, but it was very linked to groin hygiene and health, and so talking about testing, checking yourself for testicular lumps, but also they had things like testicular cologne, for example. So if you wanted to smell nicer down there, just because, I think when men are in the shower, sometimes they can just be very quick all over, but very few areas get specific attention. And we've got a lot of women's brands bringing out feminine hygiene products as well. We're seeing a lot of care for the feminine hygiene area, but not so many for men. And I think it's just as big an opportunity.
And I think that's quite interesting, because I think being a bit tongue-in-cheek as well can be a good way to target men about sensitive issues, because it's very difficult sometimes to approach these subjects or talk about these subjects. Old Spice have done it very well in their sort of rebirth for the last over a decade now, but that whole kind of using humour, and now they're talking more about actual product benefits rather than just talking about, this is a man, be the man that I can be, which I still love. But but it's interesting to see how that conversation is changing. We can use humour. Axe, for example, as well. I don't know if you remember, they had an ASMR advert that they ran about shower and shave, in that it was about a similar thing. It was about shaving your body. shaving intimate areas as well. And for that, again, it was quite humorous. So they had the ASMR of like the blade. They actually used 2 coconuts to symbolise a men's area. And yeah, it was just that sound of like scraping, and it was tapping into that ASMR. Yeah. It was all, as I say, completely tongue-in-cheek. It's all in this sort of humorous way. But that can be an interesting way to talk about that and bring that kind of thing up for men. And as you say, if we can then bring the health aspect in, that could be interesting. I remember seeing the Chilean women's national team. They had an anthem for awareness where whenever the Chilean team sing their national anthem, the women would normally put their arm across their chest. And the idea was what they did is that they worked with a breast cancer awareness sort of organisation, and then they actually made up a routine. So as they were singing the national anthem on telly, they would then lift one arm up, and as their arm went across, they would then feel for lumps. It was like this idea that while we're singing the anthem, we're checking, and it's all about awareness. I'm not suggesting that a men's football team should start checking during the national anthem, but I think that kind of sort of subtle or just sort of clever way of just sort of slipping it into the norm, slipping it into the mainstream, and because that's ultimately what we want from awareness.
Because there's the idea that we can't just straight away bring emotion to men's campaigns, like a strong outburst of emotion, because a lot of men still feel uncomfortable sort of with that level of emotion. You can't just suddenly make all of your sort of shaving adverts or shower gel adverts about, standing in the shower crying or something. Men would feel men wouldn't feel right about that. So that humour is a great way to start bringing the conversation around. Humour is very, very important. I think that's one of the things I liked about when I talked about Dewy Dudes in the education piece, but they do it through, as I said, sort of like memes and bro humour, because they know that's the way to get to men. And you can't just start talking about this topic because men won't respond in that way.
Do you see in makeup that's the same in terms of, because with makeup are maybe men more invested or they have more of a vested interest in the makeup already? Or like, is that the same for men? Like, would humour work for men, or is there a different way to approach it from that category?
I think for makeup, it's really emerging and still niche right now. So I wouldn't see it maybe straight away for it, especially because you have a lot of bias around the category for many men. So I guess it's all about adoption first. The category I would see it coming would be more fragrances for men, and also unisex fragrances. When you see it's for women. When you see the new campaign for the last perfume of Ariana Grande, which is called Thank You Next. It's actually very humorous, and it's really breaking the rule of perfumes being designed to seduce someone. So it's more about being a young woman and all the gossips and the high school, and it's very nostalgic. It references Mean Girls, the movie. So it's all about this kind of like playful tone of voice. And I think because as a category, fragrance is very seen as very premium, but actually you have so many new formats emerging that can really appeal to men. I guess there is in some way opportunity to really capture their culture with a lot of humor.
Well, it seems like there are new approaches and new ways that we need to approach men going forward. There are new ways to engage men, have that more personal sort of touch and target them a bit better. It seems as well that between all the different categories, there is also a different approach to be had. So there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all for men. This isn't going to work just for men. And also, on top of that, that's not going to just work for all men. Again, Western men, Eastern men, depending where you are in the world. Again, there's different messages, but it's important to understand and to help men increase their understanding.
I think in beauty, the fact that, as a category, we like to talk about how all women are different, and we like, that kind of body positivity movement. And, we're talking about women being individual. We've got to acknowledge that men are also individual. The entire market needs to start thinking about men as individuals.
Brilliant. Well, that seems like a good point to wrap up on, just because it seems like we're done for today. We've kind of taken up our allotted time. Thank you so much for joining me today. Alex, thank you again for your inputs today.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for having me.
And thank you very much, Margaux, for joining us. Your first podcast, but I thought it was superb. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope to have you both back in at some point very soon, and we can
sure.
talk about more different topics in the world of beauty. But that does do it for today. To learn more about Mintel, the world's leading market intelligence agency, or any of the topics that we've discussed today, please head over to mintel.com. And please also be sure to subscribe to Little Conversation wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you very much, and have a great day.